Okay, so this is a walkthrough of a6container, the last level of ThunderCTF. And as you can see, I've launched the level already. I have the access token or the initial credentials given to me, and it asks us to find a secret, which is located in a file called secret.txt in a private bucket on the project. So I'll go ahead and, as we've done in the previous levels, I'll basically activate the service account from this JSON file as before. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, figure out what credentials this corresponds to. So I'll do Python scripts test permissions on that, on the service account key that I start with. And it's going to tell me that I have the ability to get compute instances, list them, their zones. I can list storage buckets and objects, but I can't get them. So this is interesting. So I could actually do a gsutil ls to see that there is this bucket here that I might want to get stuff in, and then I can do a listing of that bucket in order to see the file that's in there. But then if I try and copy this thing, because I don't have the objects get, this should be denied. So yeah, access denied exception. And the goal is to elevate my privileges so I can get that file. So the goal of the level is there. But I start with compute instances get and list. So I'll list some instances. And see which instances that are running. And you can see I have an a6container VM running, the name of it. So I'll do a gcloud compute instances describe this container name to figure out everything that it has running on it. And one of the things that you'll, it doesn't matter which zone, wherever it is, one of the things that you'll see when this executes, there's a lot of different certificates associated with it. All right, so this is the instance. And basically, if you scroll down here, you can get all sorts of information about this instance. One of the things that you'll get to see is that it's running a container image, and this container image looks like it's on Docker Hub. So we'll get to that later. Another thing that you'll see is that the container is running on the container port 80 is listening to host port 80. So it looks like there's a web server running on there. And this is the IP address of the service, the external IP address. And so one of the things you'll note is that in the tag, it's got the HTTP server tag, which means that this has the firewall rule such that incoming HTTP is allowed. So we can actually go to this IP address over HTTP and see what it has. And it's got just hello world in it. So this is pretty useless to us. But one of the things that it has is this container name. This container image seems to be running on this. So we could actually, on a Linux machine, bring this up. And so on any Linux machine that's got Docker installed, and I have a machine here that's got Docker installed. I could basically do a Docker pull. And then I can give the URL for it. And it can basically pull that container image down for me. And so now I have a copy of that container image locally. So then what I can do is I can actually run an instance of it, connect into it, and then poke around. So if you're running container images inside of your cloud project, they must all be secured so that random people like me can't get at them. So I'm going to run this container image. and get an interactive shell on this. And so I can run bin bash on it. And so this is the shell on that container, and I can see it's running a document. I don't have much on this. All right, I have cat. So this is the application I have. It is simple Flask application, default route, which we saw, that basically returns hello world. That's not interesting. But one of the things that's here is that, hey, it looks like it's got this secret route called admin proxy with this information. And it basically allows someone to access this. And as part of this admin proxy, you can get this thing to fetch basically a remote URL. So that's an interesting thing to have. You can just basically do a request.get of the argument that you pass in as URL. And this, in order for this to work, this is basically an SSRF. And it used to be the case that you could SSRF into the metadata service without any special headers being attached. But as it turns out, we had to manufacture an SSRF once Google shut this down, because this this particular web app requires you to actually set the metadata flavor header, but we're just simulating an SSRF into the metadata service. And so if we visit this proxy route with a URL and point that URL to the metadata service, we can get a token out of this thing. Or if we give it just a regular URL, we can get it to fetch any content on our behalf over the internet. So let's go back to this route, and then I'm going to visit the route here that's in this container. And you can see this is an admin proxy. Enter any URL to access by proxy. And this is the thing that's basically, if you click on it, this is basically a form that will then submit this, will basically submit this as the URL parameter for this particular link, the proxy link. So that's the functionality of this. I could put http:// google.com, maybe www.google.com, because all of this stuff will redirect, and then it will point me to google.com. Okay, so then one of the things that we have seen with SSRFs is that if they contain the URL to get the access token from the backend, then you could basically get the access token associated with the virtual machine that's running your container. And so the token for the metadata service is basically this URL. So metadata googleinternal.com, and then you get the service accounts and then the token. And so this is what you get back. You get the access token of the virtual machine running this container. And this particular access token, you can test the permissions of. So we're going to go back to our cloud project, and we're going to ask our script, what are the permissions on this token, to see whether or not we have elevated privileges. And as you can see, it has the storage objects get permission, which is the one we really wanted when we started the level. Okay. So with this token, we know the object that we want to get from the previous poking around. So now we can actually curl the storage endpoint with this token, and then specifically ask for that object out of that bucket. So in order to do so, this is the command. Let me get it in a notepad. Oops, this is from a previous level. I don't need this anymore. So this is the command that we give you to access the stored API. And so if you see, it's got the bucket name. So that was the bucket name. So we can replace this in the API call with the bucket name that we're interested in. The object name is basically secret.text. So we can replace that there. And then the bearer token is the one we just pulled out of the using the proxy. So we can copy and paste that into this command. And then from here, we can copy this command and then execute this curl. And you can see this is the secret that comes back. So that solves the level. And so you can see we pivoted around, we found an open container image, we examined a secret admin route on it that had an SSRF, we got the token of the compute engine instance that was running the container, and then that thing had the storage objects get permission that we used to get that secret that we initially wanted. So that ends the execution of this level. I can get rid of this, and now we're going to do the forensic analysis of this next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look at the activity summary to see the different accesses that have occurred. So we'll go back to here and look at the activity. I can reduce this. And you can see this is the final get object, and you can see I'm using the container VM service account. The thing that's running that virtual machine has a service account and not the original a6 access service account. So there's multiple service accounts again. The original one didn't have the storage objects get, but I elevated my privileges by getting the privileges of the virtual machine service account, and then I used that to get the secret.text. So that shows up as the last thing that has happened. You can see the storage objects list has occurred before that to find a listing of the bucket before getting the bucket. You can see the get instance request that I used to figure out what was running on this virtual machine, and then everything else was done internal to that Docker container. So the exfiltration event, so that would basically, so that we ask you to go to the Logs Explorer and find the exfiltration event. So we can go down to Logging Logs Explorer. And you can find the storage objects get event. This is the exfiltration event. You can expand that out. You can look at the authentication information that includes the service account that was used. And so you see that the service account shows up as we saw that before. What is in the request metadata? So information about the caller. So this is again our Cloud Shell IP address, and then we used a curl to get at that API to do the get. So yeah, this IP address is a red flag because you're using this is a different IP address than the IP address that's running the virtual machine. And so that virtual machine is running on 197.35.197.40.100. And so the token should be associated with this IP address. And the fact that it's not indicates that that should be fishy. And one of the things they've done, they suggest later on, is that your access tokens should be bound to an IP address so that people can't just steal an access token and use it from some other location. They have to use it on the machine itself that the token was assigned to. And that's one way of doing kind of multi-factor authentication for tokens. And this is something that will eventually become more prevalently done. It's not done on this particular level, which allows us to steal a token and then use it to get this object. Okay, that's the audit log. There isn't a ton here that's different than the other levels, but what is different is that sometimes the log events that you are interested in are only on the, I guess, the running server itself. And so in this case, it's in that Docker container. I might want to do forensic analysis, not only on the cloud events and the cloud project events, but also within that Docker container. So what I can do is I can go to Compute Engine and then see, oh, I have, and this is me as the owner of this. So like, assuming that you as a defender have God mode on your project, you can see that this is your virtual machine that's running this container, and then you should be able to SSH in as the owner. So I'm playing the defender. I should be able to just SSH into this and do some forensic analysis of it. So let me do that. I'm going to connect up to here. Use a large font because my eyes are terrible. And then this allows me to log in. And then what I can do is I can do a Docker PS to figure out which containers are running. And so you can see here, the container is running this container image, and it's got this particular container name. So then I can do a Docker exec-it on this container name, KLT a6container is the container name, and then I want to run bin bash on this thing, and this gets me a session on this container. And so if I edit the container, you can see that the logs for this container are being kept in this access log file, and you can see the access log is in the same directory. So I'm gonna cat out this directory, and this is where you can see all of the different requests that have come through, and you can see the admin proxy has been used to get google.com, and then down here, I don't know if I can turn the highlighting off. You can barely read that. That's like, I think it thinks I'm in a dark background. Yeah, it's thinking I'm in a dark background. I'm like, oh, wow, that's definitely an eye chart. So then you can see that the admin proxy has been used to do the pivoting over to get that token. Now, this is not something that you would see in the cloud logs unless you have configured your container to stream events into the audit logs of the cloud, which can be done, but it's not done in this particular case, which is why we connected up directly to this container running this service to find that this request has happened. And that's basically what this part of the code lab is asking you to do. All right, so that is the last level of ThunderCTF. I hope this helps.